I started standing up to my ex-husband about like, well, I'm not going to do this. I call it like burning the white flag. The white flag is like, I surrender, whatever it is that you want. Like, no, I'm going to light that. I'm going to douse it in gasoline and I'm going to light it on fire because I will not surrender. I've got too much life left in me. I've got too much fight left in me.
Today's episode features a friend of a former guest of the Life Shift podcast. Her name is Wiley Davis, and she's an author, a horse lover, and a brave human. Her journey towards self discovery and healing is a testament to the power of believing in yourself and taking action, and just the general importance of self love. Growing up in a religious household, Wiley struggled to align her beliefs with her family's expectations. So she learned to navigate these expectations by perfecting the art of being two different people, the real Wiley and the version of herself that everyone else wanted to see. Despite the challenges she faced as a child, she found solace in her love for horses. Riding became her escape, her happy place, and her true passion. So, throughout this episode, Wiley shares her personal journey from the traumatic childhood experiences that she had to the unraveling of her marriage and how her love for horses ties that all together. Her story is a powerful reminder that it's never too late to start healing and that there's always hope for a better tomorrow. This episode is supported by my Patreon members. If you want to join the Patreon community, please head to www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com/join to find out more about the different tiers, and you can enter yourself in the t-shirt giveaway. I also want to say thank you to the Trailer Park Podcast. I entered a giveaway that they had after listening to one of their episodes. And so what you're hearing right now in this introduction is recorded on one of the audio interfaces that I won, which is a Focusrite Vocaster 2 Studio. So thank you to that podcast. These call to actions that we do on these podcasts are super helpful to us as podcast hosts, but also as a listener, you're able to potentially win things like the t-shirt giveaway that I have on my Patreon feed. But in any case, get ready for an honest and thought-provoking conversation with my new friend, Wiley Davis. I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift. Candid conversations about the pivotal moments that have changed lives forever. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Life Shift podcast. I am here with my new connection, Wiley. Hey, Wiley.
Hello.
And so I'm interested today to talk to you because, as most of the guests understand, I just have a short form that I ask the guests to fill out, and I don't want to ask too much because I really want to uncover things. And when we first connected, I learned that you had a book coming out soon, which it's out now as we talk. And you mentioned, hey, I can send you the book and you can kind of learn all about it. And I was like, no, don't send it to me yet. I want to talk to you first with no preconceived ideas and have this conversation. So I really appreciate you being willing to just come on the show and talk about it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is really exciting, and I've loved your podcast and the roads that you go down and the questions and honest conversations that you have. So I'm excited to be here.
Well, thank you, and no pressure now that I have to come up with the best questions to talk about. I think we were talking before we recorded or before we pressed record about how these conversations kind of unfold in their own way. And, we have an idea of the direction that we might go, but who knows, what questions might come up. And I think that's my favorite part about the show is really two people sitting down and actively listening to each other and asking those curious questions without feeling like, ooh, I need to pad this with something. So I'm really interested to see where we end up going. But, to start us off, I think it might be interesting to have you kind of paint the picture of like what your life was like, what this, I mean, you don't have to tell us from the day you were born to that point, but kind of give us an idea of kind of life before what we think your major life shift is.
So I grew up in North Carolina. My dad was a Presbyterian minister, and growing up as a secret atheist in a Presbyterian house was no easy feat. I sort of perfected having the real me and then the version of me that, my parents wanted to see and people at church wanted to see. And I found the real me with a group of girlfriends at an old cow farm turned into a horse property where we all took riding lessons. And, we were 13 years old and we had zero supervision. And we would take the bus there after school and forget homework. Like, there's stalls that need to be cleaned. And we had many, many adventures. So from there, I rode horses my entire life, really just found a community. Super got into photography. I had a dark room in my garage. And then I went to college. I refused to take the SATs because I didn't feel like they were a fair standard of measuring people's success down the road. And if you have to pay to learn how to take a test, like, is this really a fair measurement?
Of course it is.
Right.
Society says it is, and so it is.
Well, when you don't do what society tells you to do, you end up with very limited options sometimes. So I got into like four schools, and one of them was a very small Christian college in South Carolina where I also didn't fit in. And from there, I was like, you know what? This is not me. This is not who I am. This is not what I want to do. I was teaching horseback riding lessons at an all girls summer camp, and I was telling all of these little girls, like, you can go and do and be anything that you want to be. And, seeing them just thrive and have good girlfriends and, make these lifelong friendships. I was like, if I can tell these girls this, why can't I live it? So I got accepted to the film school of my choice. 2 weeks before I was supposed to go back for my sophomore year, my junior year, I told my family, like, I'm going to Los Angeles. I'm going to film school. I'm going to work in the film industry. And I lived in LA for 15 years before moving to Florida.
Wow. You know what? I can't continue this conversation without going back to the secret atheist comment, because I think there's a lot of people that could completely relate to growing up in a very religious household and not really ascribing to, or not at all, if you're saying an atheist, not really believing in anything that your family quote unquote stood for. Was there something that drew you to not being I guess you were performative because your family wanted you to be a certain way, but do you remember anything of, like, why you became an atheist?
I remember the moment specifically. We had a family dog, and she was a Brittany Spaniel, and her name was Penny. And I was 6 or 7 years old, and I was talking about Penny going to heaven, and that I couldn't wait, to know that she would always be in heaven. And my mom said, "Yeah, no, dogs don't go to heaven." And I was like, "Okay, I can't believe in this. Like, if you're going to tell me that the dog doesn't go to heaven, like, that is something I will not subscribe to." And it was from that moment where I was like slowly chipping away at the nopes, nopes, nopes. That's not for me. And then the other thing is, I think being in a fishbowl and having everyone look at us and living in this glass house, the person who my dad was at home was a very different person than who he was at the pulpit. And so as I got older and more rebellious and, became my authentic self, I was able to then learn how to stand up to him. That's a little bit how I took my power back.
How old were you when you were told your dog wasn't going to heaven?
Like 6 or 7.
It's fascinating to me that you were able to start deconstructing something that early on in your life and go, wait a second, doesn't this apply to everyone and everything here? And or is it just what we choose to absorb or to believe in? And I guess that dichotomy of what your home life was compared to what the performative version of your family, to the congregation, that's a whole other world. Not to go down some other rabbit hole, but it's very interesting to me.
Well, definitely. And, I was very fortunate in that I found people throughout my life that would help me sort of nurture that side of myself. So there were a handful of people that were like, "Yeah, you don't have to do this. Like, you can be safe here, and we can help you, figure out what you believe." And so, my best friend growing up, Abby, her whole family, they are some of the smartest people that I've ever known in my entire life. Having them just be able to say, read this book, or, take a look at this, or let's watch this movie, and just allowing me the space to kind of put those pieces together for myself. Having someone that gives you the freedom to be able to say, I don't have to do this thing that everyone else expects me to do. Like, I think all it takes is one person that just loves you unconditionally and can give you that elasticity and resilience.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us have grown up in the sense that we feel like we have to do what, our family wants us to do or what society, quote unquote, tells us that we need to do. And so it's interesting knowing that and knowing the situation that you lived in, with the public facing minister, perfect church family, if you will, and like kind of living this secret, I don't believe in anything they're saying life makes sense when you say you didn't want to take the SAT. And it makes sense that you didn't want, that you wanted to go to film school and not to this small Christian college. All of that kind of like, it seems like that one decision at 6 years old to go, wait, is this are they just telling me this or is it real? That questioning. Do you find, not to jump way ahead, but do you find other pieces in your life where you kind of went against what other people were telling you to do? Has that happened?
Oh my gosh. Yes.
We don't have
Yeah.
to, I mean, I'm just curious because I think, if we find that one thing way down deep seated, I mean, maybe it wasn't so deep seated for you, but like in our childhood, and then we can like pinpoint things. And the reason I asked this, and we'll get back into your story in a second, but when I was, it took me, after my mom died, it took me like 20 years to really like find the way to close the door on my grief journey. And I do think that the trigger moment for me in that journey was when my like fifth therapist, you got to find the right one, but my fifth one, she was like, "You realize that everything that you've done since your mom died, you've done with the mind of the kid who lost his mom, like, at that point in time. You were making decisions because you were scared. You were making decisions because you didn't want this to happen, that to happen, whatever it might be." And so part of me thinks, "Okay, at 6 years old, she got this little inkling of like, wait a second." And then that, like, seeds all the other things that where you were like, "No way. I'm not doing what you tell me to do. I'm doing what I wanna do." I love it.
Yes. And that, okay. So the moment that my marriage fell apart was so we lived in Los Angeles. My ex-husband was a producer, editor, writer, and I gave up a lot to have this life in Los Angeles. Like, you're living paycheck to paycheck. I had a very modest salary working in content marketing. Like, we struggled. I got a job working in technology that, doubled my salary. And we went out to celebrate, and my husband said to me, I do not want you to ride horses. So I wanted to get this job so that I could go ride horses. Like, that was the whole plan. I'd worked for 6 months for this. And so we sit down at the celebration dinner and he says, I want you to stop riding horses so that I don't have to work and I can stay at home and write my screenplay. And in that moment, it was, you've married the wrong girl. Like, I am never going to give up my dream so that you don't have to work for yours. But it was also this moment of like, okay, Wiley Davis, who are you? Who are you going to be, the person that gives up yourself and your dreams and a part of who you are for this idea of a marriage? And it was at that moment where I started to see all of the other things start to crumble that were just these plastic pillars holding up the marriage. And then started the unraveling of my marriage. I moved to Los Angeles. It took me just as long to get divorced as we were married. It was a really horrific experience. And then I started trying to date again. And I went on this really awful date that was somewhat traumatic for me. I had to stop and go, okay, wait a minute. I have to address why I picked my ex-husband in the first place before I can move forward trying to date anyone else. Like, if I don't heal these things now, then I will continue to make the same mistakes over and over and over and over again. So it was through therapy, and you're exactly right, it is finding the right therapist, someone that you can trust, someone that is talented and skilled, someone who has tools and expertise. I've been in therapy my entire life, off and on, right? But this was the first time where I was like, okay, we're going to do this. Like, we're going to dive into this, we're going to unpack it. And the three questions that I wanted to walk out of therapy having asked, and this was really about myself, how do we unpack it, right? Like, how does the 6-year-old Wiley Davis turn around and become like a fully functioning, healed human being? So the three questions were, why did I pick him? Why did I stay? And what was I getting out of the marriage? And the why did I pick him came from the abuse that I had from both my parents. My mom had a temper. She didn't beat us often, but it did happen. And we were always very, whenever her voice would raise, we would just get in this place of like, okay, is it going to happen now? Like, is she going to unload? Is she going to see red? Is she, so just navigating this place of heightened fear. And then the narcissism that my dad had. So here's this person who is so charismatic and he can fill up a room and tell great stories and everyone loves him. And so those two things, you put them together, that was my husband. That was who I married. So that was why I picked him. I chose him because I knew how to survive it. I stayed because until that moment where he said it's me or the horse, I was willing to give up everything. That was something that was too much. That was my breaking point. That was when I said, I am not willing to give up myself and what I have worked for so that you don't have to work for your dreams.
I'm wondering why you were willing to give up everything and then the horses. I know, was that because the horses in your teen years was your outlet? It was like with your friends, it was that piece that kind of created you because you couldn't be you at home. And so you were able to be you with those horses. And like there's more of that like soul connection. Then it's not really about riding horses, but rather the fact that like that was the defining moment, or am I way off?
No, that's 100% it. Not only was it, so when I was 13 years old, I had this Arabian pony and I leased her from one of the boarders at the barn. And my best friend Abby lived down the street from the barn. And we would sneak out of the house in the middle of the night, like spend the night parties. There's 10 of us. And we would jump out of her window on the first floor, walk across the street, go into the paddocks. And I could jump on that pony, no halter, no bridle, no nothing, and just ride. We could canter up the trails. She knew exactly what I was thinking. I still have dreams where she comes to me in those dreams and, it's like she's just visiting me. She is a part of who I am. And so this idea of like I can't afford to do this on my own and I'm going to work really hard to get to a place where I can start doing it again, then to have that moment where he's like, no, 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 don't do that thing that you've worked so hard for you. Let that go and do it for me.
Well, it was essentially get rid of that piece of your soul because, your description of this pony as a child, it was not, it was more, it was that was your family. Like that was your your deep soul connection to something. And yes, it's a horse, but it sounds like that was the last straw because it was like, no, no, just sell your soul at this point, like for this marriage and stay and do what I need, not what, like who cares how you're feeling on the inside. So interesting.
Yeah. But it was also those friendships, right? So each one of us had that relationship with our horse. So it was just this really safe sort of family community. And I am still really good friends with those girls today. And we can finish each other's sentences about the horses that came and went from our barn.
What was that final question from your therapist?
What was I getting out of the marriage?
Yeah, what were you getting out of it?
Okay, brace yourself. Trigger warning. Throughout some of the work that I've done in my life, I came to realize that I was sexually abused as a child and that I have strong reasons to believe that it was my father. I don't have proof. There's, you know, nothing that I can take to a court and say, this thing happened to me, but my body knows it, my brain knows it, my heart knows it. Because of that experience, I equated sex with love. So if I have sex with you, then I'm getting this emotional filling up of like my love cup. But it took me saying no to I'm not going to give up the horse, to the year and a half of my entire marriage unraveling, and his temper and his rage and his narcissism and his lies and all of those things. During that time, we stopped having sex because, you're living with someone that you feel nothing towards at this point. And so it actually wasn't until I wrote the book that I was able to answer that question and really equate the sex equals love and put the piece together that the second that we stopped having sex, I was not getting anything from the marriage. And that made it so much easier at the final straw to just be able to walk away and move on.
First, I'm sorry for your experiences as a child. It's no one should have to go through that. It's interesting to me that where you said that it is equals love, because we should really probably put quotes around love in that sense, right? In that it was in your relationship with your ex-husband, it was filling a familiar, what you were told or what was performed as love, right? In the sense of like, my parents love me, my dad loves me. This is what I know of love. And so you were trying to replicate that. But I think it's also important to you know this. That wasn't love. It was just that familiar blanket. I talk to a lot of people about the sense of, if you've ever been depressed, it's very easy to seek out those depressive moments or the things that comfort you, in a sense of like, I know this is familiar and I can stay here. It's a lot harder to go against that. And so that's my perception, and I hope that it wasn't really love in that sense.
It's like your whole life is a marathon and you're running and you're so hungry. And the thing that you get to eat at the end is cotton candy, which is just like non substantial air, saccharine sweet, not filling, but it's just this giant, if you were hungry and it was like a actual meal, you wouldn't be able to eat it all, right? But it's just this air that's not even real.
You were saying you chose your husband for the same reasons that you stayed with your husband essentially, and it's because that family life that was sold to you as a child, whether good, bad, or indifferent, was what you knew how to exist in.
Correct.
And as a child, it sounds like, and I don't know you very well, but you've shared a lot. As a child, it sounds like you performed at home this version of you, and then when you were with your horses and your best friends, that was the real you. But you gravitated towards what was familiar. You knew that you could do the things that you wanted to do in your grown-up life, and then pretend at home that this all makes sense.
100%. And there were so many times that I stop and I look back, and any kind of relationship, particularly when it falls apart, we have to take responsibility, right? We have to go back and say, well, what did I contribute to this? And what I contributed to it was that I lost myself and I lost my voice. So all of these times, all of these little red flags that would come up, I would just go, okay, is it really that bad? Do I really have to bring this up? Do I really have to, deal with this? Like, and it was familiar, like all of the embellishments, like that's how my dad, lived our lives, right? The one other thing that I did want to sort of circle back on with my dad that kind of heightens just the level of like how awful sometimes people can be. For me, it was not just, my dad. sort of taking advantage of the situation and, having this little girl. It was the added layer of, well, Jesus would give up his body for other people. And what would Jesus do? And, just this like level of it's manipulation, but it's also like fear, right? Because if you disappoint Jesus, then you're going to go to hell. And if and also all of these lies that you grew up with as a preacher's kid, which is like, I have to be perfect. I can ruin my father's ministry if I do something wrong, or if I say something wrong, or if I, talk about something that I'm not supposed to.
So fear-based living.
Yeah, if I don't have all of the answers, I'm the preacher's kid. We're at Bible study. Somebody's going to ask me something. A, I don't care about it because I'm not Christian anyways. And, here's this uh, preacher's kid who isn't going to have the answers. Like, all of that was compounded for
Right.
me.
You were an actor. You were acting your whole life. You were out of fear. It's there's like so many pieces that are like swirling through my mind of I'm not a religious person. I never have been. I think I'm more, and maybe I'm not. I think I'm more logical in a sense in which I question a lot. Like if I can't see it or prove it, it's a lot harder for me to kind of buy into. And as I think like your dad controlling that situation through fear, through the manipulation of a book, of a faith, of something like that. And also showing that, like, look, everyone sees us as this. We must be this way. If you don't, you can blow up the entire family. You can ruin everything that we have. And so, like, as a kid, you're taking this on, like, holy shit, like, this is not my burden to bear, and then kind of traveling into like that marriage, the little red flags. If I address this little red flag, is that going to blow up the glass house, right? Like, was there a performative aspect to your marriage that you look back on now and you're like, oh yeah, we were totally faking this?
100%. Yes. And until I stopped doing that. I feel like another sort of turning point, we talk about like the life shift and what, really just are those points where we stop doing those things, right? The 2016 election was that for me. I have understood that there was a phenomena that people who have had some kind of abuse in their lifetime basically relived that on election night. There's this feeling of like, no one believes me. And, here's this person that's in power and thinks, everyone now thinks that it's okay because he did it and he's the president. So you relive that, right? And after the election, I was like, I am not living my life like this. I will not continue to do this. And it was the election where I was like, okay, I'm going to get a better job. I'm going to start doing these things. And I started living differently. And those different like moments, I started sort of standing up to my ex-husband about like, well, I'm not going to do this. Like, and I call it like burning the white flag. Just the white flag is like, I surrender, whatever it is that you want. Like, no, I'm going to light that. I'm going to douse it in gasoline and I'm going to light it on fire because I will not surrender. I've got too much life left in me. I've got too much fight left in me.
The election, I'm wondering, is it because you saw millions of people backing someone that reminded you of other people in your life and that experience of living in a Christian household and not believing any of that stuff and kind of seeing, followers of a whatever religion really seeing it in that way and kind of like mirroring that. And then you're like, wait a second, I've done this my whole life and now I don't want to do it anymore. And so that was like your turning point of like, I'm not following a crowd of people that believe something that is to be untrue.
Yes. Yes. And then kind of circling back onto like your original question of like, were we performative? Yes, my ex-husband would do all of these different events and screening and, celebrity this and celebrity that. And it was like you were to be the quiet arm candy. And when I started riding the horse, I started finding my voice. And then I stopped being quiet. And then the whole foundation shattered.
Did you find that in that performative sense, was your couplehood publicly different than your home life? Was he like your dad? Was he different in public than he was at home?
Yes. My best friend Courtney, there was a time, so he never hit me. My ex-husband never hit me, but he had a temper and would throw things and would stomp things and would slam doors that would echo through, streets, like scream, pound his fist on things. So I lived in this world of like, okay, when is that going to be directed at me? Because that's what I lived with as a child. And there was a time towards the very end of the marriage where he came home. I was financially supporting us. So he stopped working. I was financially supporting us. I was still riding. I said, look, you still have to contribute to the household. I don't care what it is that you do. I'm not giving up the horse and the riding lessons so that you don't have to work. Like you still have to do this. But I was covering more and more. I was buying all of our groceries, giving him a gas card, all of that stuff. There was a night that he came in and we were taking turns sleeping on the couch. And I was asleep on the sofa and he came in, slammed the door. It was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. He was so drunk and he was like, I lost $1,000 on a pool game. And I'm just sitting here like my dogs are sitting on top of me. We are all shaking. And I'm going like, okay, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Is this bad enough for me to leave? Do I leave right now? Do I leave forever? Because I'm not ready to give up on the marriage. He still hasn't hit me. Like, what do I do? And I relayed that to my best friend Courtney, who I lived with after I left my husband. And she was like, I had no idea that this was going on. I had no idea the level of fear that you were living with. Like Chad would say mean things in public and he would like, kind of not manhandle me, but he was very narcissistic, right? Like if I defied him with something, then, I paid for it later. If I was late to pick him up, then, he would be in a bad mood all weekend, that sort of thing. So she saw like bits and pieces of that, but there was never this like, I didn't realize how vengeful and how much in fear you lived.
Was there a time where you I don't know, were you ever a fixer? Did you feel like that was your job to fix him?
Oh my God.
Because you couldn't fix your parents? Like, I feel like sometimes we're like, "Oh, we couldn't do that, but maybe we can do it this time."
I had a boyfriend who was a secret meth addict. He was a dog walker and he got arrested and I thought I had to fix him from, that like it was my job to save him and, like him going in and out of jail and, being on meth and then being off meth and, like me taking care of his dogs and, paying his rent. Like all of these things that I should not have done was not my responsibility to do, but I felt like I had to do. And the thing about Austin was he would stalk me. So there was a night where my dog had diarrhea in the middle of the night and like I wear glasses. Like I am almost blind without my glasses and I couldn't find them and the dog had diarrhea and so I go outside and he gets out of his truck across the street from me. I hadn't seen or heard from him in months. And he starts coming up to me and he gets close enough where I can actually see him and I'm just like, "Oh my god, like what are you doing outside my apartment watching my like this is bizarre." And then, having to call the police and the, crime copter going above and like him banging on my window and refusing to leave. Like that was the one where I was like, okay, I have to fix him until I got to the point where I was like, I can't fix you. It's not my job to fix you. Like this is your journey and I have to move on with my life. interesting thing is, after I left my ex-husband, the dog walker showed up back in my life. So here I am having 2 men that I am terrified of following me around.
It's interesting, and I'm I'm glad I understand your childhood, because I think a lot of those pieces kind of play into the decisions, like you explained, that you were doing. Had your ex-husband at the time, or your ex-husband now, had he expressed a disinterest in your relationship or passion for horses before that celebratory dinner, that everything was like light switch?
It wasn't even a disinterest. He would say things like,
So this wasn't new.
it was not new. You're gonna go, ride these big dumb animals, or, I can't believe that you're gonna be gone, for 4 hours on a Saturday to, go up in the canyon and ride these big dumb animals. There was a payment that I had to give him on nights that I would ride and come home late. And so he was like, "Look, if you're gonna go ride and you're gonna miss dinner, like you're gonna owe me when you get home." I did it until I said I'm not gonna do this anymore.
What do you think it was about that one night? I mean, if he had been saying it before, like, what was that final statement?
That was the first time that he said, "I want you to stop doing this so that I don't have to work." It was that moment where I was like, "Okay, this is done." Like, I'm fine. And it was also the gradual building up of like, I'm writing, I'm making good girlfriends. I've got a horse that's teaching me a lot about myself and a lot about life. And there's something worth fighting for at this point. And so, that moment for me, I think anyone can relate to the moment when they know that something is over, right? And the horse is a could be, I want a baby and my partner doesn't. Or I want to move to be closer to family and my partner doesn't. Or I have a sick parent and my I need to go take care of them and my partner's not there for me. Or I have cancer and I have no sex drive, so my partner is absent, in this, or having an affair. I fell in love with someone else and I can't be in this relationship anymore. My partner fell in love with someone else, and the horse is really just the moment where in anyone's marriage that's crumbling, where you go, okay, what am I willing to give up of myself for this marriage or for this idea?
I mean, I feel like I'm just making this up at this point because I don't know. But I feel like you doing, and as an adult, you finding the horses, you explain, you finding your friends, you're connecting again. It was your safe space. And he was, before he was just insulting your safe space. He was saying it was silly. It was like, don't do that. That's dumb. But now he's saying, give up your safety and where you feel most like yourself so that I can do what I want to do. And to me, that feels like, from your story, that kind of almost feels like you were refinding what you had as a child with your friend. And you were like, I finally feel like me again in these spaces. And he's like, get rid of you. It's all about me.
It was also like the you that you've been up until this point has taken up too much space. You've wanted too much. You've asked for too much, which, being a small child on a preacher's salary, like when I rode horses, I had to pay for it myself. There was no extra money for my parents to be like, "Oh, sure, you want horseback riding lessons? Here, let's, fork out that money." My mom worked nights and weekends as a overnight nurse, and my dad was on a preacher's salary, and there were four of us. There was no money to go around. So it's this like, can is there space for me here? Is there space for me to want to be this kid who wants to go ride horses? Like, what if I ride my bike to the barn? Can I do that? What if, do I need to save up my allowance and go babysit and, get a job and clean stalls at the barn to be able to do this? And I mean, it taught me a lot. I learned how to be an entrepreneur, and I learned how to, work really hard for the things that I loved. And I wouldn't change that for the world. But it goes back to this, idea of like, the me that I really am doesn't belong. So let me live in this shell so that I can fit in this idea of what other people want me to be. And, I hope that that is relatable to people too, right? Like, I come from a family of doctors and my dad wants me to be a doctor and it's not who I am. Or, I'm, you know, neurodiverse and I don't fit in. Or I like people of the same sex, or I don't know who I like, or I'm, feel awful in my body. Like, all of those things is there space for me to be authentically me in this world? And if there's not, how do I learn how to be okay with me? How do I find that one person that wants me to be who I really am, that can tell me no matter what, you're going to be okay, you're going to get through this, like you're not alone. And then how do you break out of that shell and just go, I'm just going to do me. Like, this is me doing me, and no one is going to take it away.
Right. And start loving yourself for what you offer the world and not what other people praise you for or, expect of you. And then you're like, yeah, I did it. And I hate everything that I just did because I wasn't doing it for me. I think it's very relatable. And I think that unfortunately, most of us have to hit something. We have to hit, not literally hit something. We have to have a moment, like a watershed moment. And like when your husband was like, give up your soul because it's my turn, or this is about me now. I need you to do all this for me. This is my expectation of you. So do it. Like, and we're married, so you have to do it. Right. And it was like, wait a second. No way. And then everything you said after that moment, you had to like did you feel like you had to, like, relearn who you were and how you could, like you said, exist not just as a shell, but as a full being?
So the name of your podcast is The Life Shift. And it's like the universe is sending you on this one path, and then you hit that roadblock, and then everything just shifts into a different path. And it's like, okay, I am not doing that anymore. I am going on a whole new path, and there might be road bumps, but like, I'm on this new path, and on this new path there's not room for the old me.
So you just, like, this was like a complete 180.
It was a breaking point, and I refused at that point. It was like, okay, fine, burn the house down, burn the white flag. Like, I will no longer give up pieces of myself, even micro pieces of myself, to fit inside this mold.
You said it took a while though to really come to terms with that or get through the divorce period and then kind of figure out how one, you mentioned this, like how you played a role in your experience and how you would never do that again. Was there a time period or was it literally like I'm taking this exit off this highway and now on a brand new road, or was there kind of like a middle space?
It was a little bit of both, right? Like, it's me or the horse. Okay, I'm choosing the horse. And then the aftermath of that, right? So it's me or the horse is not the point where you go, okay, well, this marriage is over. Right? You go, okay, now we have to negotiate new terms, because I'm a different person and you're a different person after this point. And so, can we still be together? And what does that look like? So, doing couples counseling, and then, trying to negotiate it.
So you were still trying to save that.
Yeah, I mean, it took me, I knew that I was a different person, and I knew that I would not the marriage had to change if it was going to be sustainable. And I kept changing into the person that I wanted to be and the person that I authentically was. And I started taking up more space. And in the marriage, there was not enough space for me to be me. And so it took that breakdown before I was able to really go, okay, now I'm done. Like, now it's over. Like, there is no more rationalizing it. There is no more, maybe another therapy session. There is no, like, there was another point where, where I knew, like, okay, it's only going to be a matter of time before you go from destroying my things to destroying me. And when that point happened, then I was like, okay, this ends right now. And then, I moved in with my best friend, Courtney, and then I moved to Florida, and it was amazing to be able to get out of California and, not have these two men that I was terrified of stalking me or, thinking that they would be outside my apartment. And then it took 3 years of trying to get divorced because, he was going to do everything that he possibly could to make sure that I couldn't ride.
So when that was all over, what was life like? Like how is your life different now because you can do whatever your authentic self wants to do, right? Is this the life you're living and how is it different?
Oh my god, I'm living my best life. I don't have to ask anyone's permission to do anything, right? Like if I want to foster kittens that I see on Nextdoor, surprise, I'm going to do it. I am impulsively going to go pick up the kittens and, get them the healthcare and work with whoever it is I need. Like there is no, hey, can I, is it okay if no, I'm going to do it. Like I'm going to do this. And, do I want to go travel? Sure, I'm going to do it. Do I want to buy a house? Okay, I'm going to do it. Do I want to quit my job and go do something else? I'm going to do it. There's a real freedom in learning who you are and then being able to live that person, right? Having said that, there's still work to be done, right? Like I am still unpacking so much of, what I've been through in my life. And there's still, I still see my therapist every week and we still do hypnotherapy and we still unpack these things. And, we constantly get to this place where it's like, okay, well, that was great. You're doing really well. Do you want to keep coming back? And I'm like, yeah, I'll come back. And then it's like, okay, this thing came up and like, how do we undo that? So, the work is never ending, and I think you said something earlier about like closing the door on grief. It's like, I don't know what your experience with grief is, but for me, the heaviness of the grief never goes away. Like you always still, or I always still carry that giant rock of grief, but sometimes it's lighter than other times and sometimes it shows up in different places and sometimes the amount of time of when I feel it is expanded. But like for me, the grief doesn't go away. I don't know that I want the grief to go away because the grief to me is the love that we had, right? Like I don't want to forget that.
Yeah, I mean my experience with it, I do feel I do feel that I closed the door. I feel it's different. I was 8 when my mom died. I don't really have memories of her. And for so long, I think that was my grief journey of me mad at the fact that I didn't have those memories, mad at the fact that I didn't have a mom, it was just everything was weirdly heavy in a way that didn't quite make sense at the end of the day because I didn't have any of those memories. And so I feel like I was very attached to the fact that the trauma happened to me and that I could use that in a positive or a negative way in my environment around me. And so when I finally realized that there was a deep seated piece, but it wasn't necessarily related to my mom dying, but the fact that I got stuck as an 8-year-old, fearful of abandonment, fearful, not that she chose to do that, but fearful that if I didn't do things right, my dad would leave. He wasn't going to. That wasn't a legitimate fear, but I was just so fearful of it. And so when I got to that point, I really do feel like I don't grieve my mother anymore because one, I don't remember her, unfortunately. In that case, yes, I think it's a little different. But to what you were saying about your grief is that you don't want to, I don't think you want to let go of it either because it taught you so much about who you are now, right? Like you had to go through all these like really dark periods that maybe didn't seem dark in the moment, but looking back on them, does it make you feel more alive and more authentic and more able to make these decisions because of looking back on that period and what you're grieving? And it's okay if you say no.
No, I think for me, I really draw strength from it.
Do you ever think if I hadn't gone through all that, if I didn't have the experience I had as a child, if I didn't have these experiences now, do you think you would be a similar version of yourself now?
No way. I wouldn't have married the person that I married. I wouldn't have. I mean, I would be a very, very different person.
I think that's sometimes why we still want to remember the things that sucked because they serve us in the future.
Yes, it's that saying, I do not regret the things that I have done. I regret those I did not do. Like every experience that we have, shapes us. And I just look at myself as like a piece of clay and I have no idea what it's going to be at the end. But, there's all of these different things that come in and impact it and shape it. I wouldn't change any of that. Like I even, say in my acknowledgments of my books, like, thank you, Chad, for saying to me it's me or the horse, because I had to choose what I was willing to give up. And I would not change anything for the person that I am today. I walk out and I kiss my horse that I bought for myself for Christmas. I am so much happier now. And I have all of the things like, I'm single. I'm not really dating. I'm, pretty picky about who I want to date. Like, I'm not going to go on a bad first date when I could be hanging out with my dog or my horse, or, working on something creative, or hanging out with a friend, or, whatever. It's not worth it to me. I sit around, my house and read a book or watch TV, and I've got like my two cats and my dog here and my other dog here. And, they follow me in the bathroom, and my house is so filled with love, like, and it's unconditional love. It doesn't matter what I look like. It doesn't matter what the number is on the scale. It doesn't matter if I've washed my hair. It doesn't matter, if I've had my coffee or not.
No, I mean, I get it. It goes back to, I've talked about this with so many people, and I do think it's true in your sense too, is that you're now at the place in which whatever society's checklist used to be, you're like, I don't care. I'm not following those guidelines. And like you started out when we first started talking, it was just like the 6-year-old who was like fully aware of the things she was supposed to do and the things she was supposed to believe, was like, wait a second, this is what? And it kind of, you can see it now in the sense of like, society might tell you you should be partnered up, right? Like you should be doing.
You should take the SATs. Everyone else is doing it. Go pay to take this test.
Exactly. And so it's nice to see that despite, because I think there are people too. There are people that have experienced childhood trauma like you. There are people that have experienced marital trauma like you. But some of those people aren't where you are yet. And so, what I love about the show is that people like you come on and share like, look, all this stuff happened to me, but look what I'm doing now. Like what's your favorite part of current version of Wiley?
I mean, I literally get to do anything I want. Anything I want. I can spend my money however I want. No excuses and no explanations and no reasons and no,
Just because you want to.
just because I want to or I don't want to. And saying no has so much freedom. You know, hey, Wiley, do you want to go blah, blah, blah? No. Or, saying no to friendships, right? Like realizing this is a little toxic for me, and I have a little bit higher standards than this, and I'm going to have to say no to this friendship because it's not serving me. It's not good for me. It's taking more out of me than I am willing to part with.
I love that you said in the acknowledgments of your book that you thanked your ex-husband for saying that moment. I think a lot of people would have difficulty in acknowledging that, and acknowledging that like it's a truly like a wake up call moment, or a watershed moment, or a burn the white flag moment, or set the house on fire moment, and having the wherewithal to be thankful for it.
Gratitude has been the most empowering thing for me that I have ever. Gratitude is how you literally get your power back. And Anthony Robbins, I talk about this in the book, said you cannot be angry and grateful at the same time. And so when I started to leave my husband, that quote came to me, and I was like, anytime I go through something in this divorce, I'm going to feel the emotion fully. If I need to cry, I'm going to cry. If I need to scream, I'm going to scream. If I need to, go get a tattoo, I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to find a reason, because of whatever it is that I'm going through, to find gratitude. there were many times where it was really hard. Like, how can I be grateful for this? How can I find gratitude? But the second that you find gratitude, it's like, I've got my power back. You can't, the best revenge is happiness. And the best way to be happy is to be thankful. So how can I be thankful?
It's interesting because you probably could have heard that statement from Tony Robbins 5 years before that and been like, "Right, okay." Like, I often feel that sometimes we see the things that we need to see at the right moments in time, kind of like therapy, like finding the right person, saying the right thing at the just the moment that you needed to hear it. Do you agree with that? Or do you think that if you had seen it 10 years earlier?
100%. And I'm not religious. I think we've talked about this, but I am deeply spiritual, and I feel like the universe or whatever it is, your intuition, your life purpose, your path, your whatever, like there are things that happen at exactly the right time. And I think the more we can learn how to listen to that inner voice, the more we can the more we empower it to like speak a little louder or speak a little softer. There's been so many moments that have been like, okay, that was a universe thing. Like, I don't know why that happened, or I don't know how that happened, but I'm going to take my hands off the wheel and just say, I am where I am. And, I'm grateful that it was what it was. And I heard that message, or I saw that thing, or, whatever it was.
I agree. I think, we have to trust ourselves and feel, what do we want to do and why do we want to do it? And if it feels right, then maybe that's what we should be doing. If we're not hurting other people by doing it, or no one's going to die because of the decision that we made directly, I guess I should say. I think we should lean into that. I like to kind of end the conversations with a question, and it's harder for you because you're at this place in which you've said, you are that clay. These moments have shaped you into this version of you. If there was an opportunity to go back to, teenage version of you living in that house with your parents and kind of faking your life, if you will, or your performative life, is there something that you could say to younger Wiley about the journey that she's about to go on that would serve her well?
I would say that things are going to happen that are going to be really hard, but never, ever, ever forget who you are. And you're going to get through it, and you're going to grow from it. And it's just going to shape and change you. So anytime something goes the way that you don't want it to, just know that it is a better thing for you down the road. And it's just going to shape you into the person that you're going to become. So just keep doing you. You're going to be just fine.
I mean, it sounds like you always really knew who you were and you always kind of had that in you, and you found that with your horses and your best friends, and then in some moments of your life you put her away a little bit, and for other people's, because you wanted to help them or perform in a particular way. But I'm so happy to.
Or I didn't know that I deserved it.
Oh, well,
I
then there's
didn't
that.
know that I could have better. I didn't know that I was worth more.
I think a lot of that stems to your childhood as well, and that you didn't know your worth until it was time to know your worth. And it's nice to learn your journey through this conversation. And it's really what I love about this show is like I really feel like this is the conversation that people just need to have with each other and learn more about each other and ask the questions that we've always kind of shied away from because like, oh no, it's going to involve something that's a little bit too vulnerable. But this is how we connect as humans. So I just appreciate you giving me your time and sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope that what I have to offer maybe helps someone else. That's kind of why I'm here. That's kind of why I'm doing it. I sat down to write the book, and the two questions I asked myself every time was, what could this do for me? And then what could it do for someone else? I did this more for the someone else than I did for myself. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of your book, we will put the book information in the show notes so that people can connect with you. They can order the book and read all about it and read about your journey. Can you remind us the name of the book?
Yes, it's called It's Me or the Horse by Wiley Davis. I'd be happy to offer a promo code for a little discount too, if that's something that would be great for your readers.
Yeah, we'll put a promo code. We'll put all that information in the show notes. And if you want to connect with Wiley, we'll have all that information there. We'll put your website there so that they can connect with you on social and whatever you offer them. I'm sure they will be happy to see.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's been a really great conversation. I really appreciated this.
Thank you for being a part of it. And thank you, listeners, for checking out the Life Shift every day, or not every day, every week. And if you are enjoying these episodes, I'd love a rating on Apple Podcasts. That seems to be the place where people go. A 5-star rating. Don't give me anything less because I'll cry about it later. And then write something nice, and then other people can discover the show. So thank you for being a part of it. And we will be back next week with a brand new episode. Thanks, Wiley.
Thank you.
For more information, please visit www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com.